Here's a shocking development. I don't think it's fair to criticize a movie on moral grounds and make arguments about its quality based on that. That claim might seem at odds with everything I've said in other videos, but hear me out. I'm someone who champions the idea of objectively criticizing movies. Contrary to what the uninformed might think, you can objectively criticize and discuss art like you can with any other observable thing that exists in this universe. It's not subjective to say that Pirates of the Caribbean 5 contradicts what was already established about the world, the characters. It's not subjective whether or not Jack is characterized differently than in the previous films. It's not subjective that it doesn't make sense that Will is a victim of the Dutchman curse when it's clearly established in the previous films that he wouldn't be. And it's not a subjective point to make the case that it's a massive contrivance that the Dial of Destiny just so happens to point to the time vortex right next to where the bad guys needed to go, given how mathematically unlikely it is to show up within driving distance. It's not subjective to say that predators in Zootopia have genetic differences that make them physically more dangerous than most prey animals. But I'm getting ahead of myself. All that objectivity is the search for truth. Truth about what a piece of art is saying. Truth about how effective it is at saying that. Part of finding the truth is by keeping an open mind and understanding that I'm just as susceptible to getting information wrong, but understanding that I can own up to it when I'm wrong and discuss things. No piece of media is sacred. They should all be discussed, good and bad, regardless of how old they are or how much of an emotional connection we might have with them. I'll openly admit that Dead Man's Chest has a whole sequence in the first act of the film that contributes barely anything while actively harming the stakes by showing that Jack can survive basically anything. Objectively speaking, that's a problem. It doesn't make the movie bad, but not as airtight as the previous movie and the next one. And guess what? It's still one of my favorite movies of all time in spite of those flaws. That's what it means to be objective. Sifting through the bullshit, giving credit where it's due, and understanding that nothing is sacred. And the most important part, understanding that criticism is a tool for artistic growth, not a game to be won. With all that aside, I think it's unfair to hold any piece of media to a standard that's entirely predicated on our own lived experiences rather than anything provable. The whole meme's the DNA of the soul thing. I was raised in a society that understands that authoritarianism is bad. Therefore, I think authoritarianism is bad. Does that mean everyone throughout history believes authoritarianism is bad? Nope, far from it actually. Technically speaking, most historical forms of monarchy are authoritarian, and most civilizations have been ruled by some form of hereditary authority. So, would it be fair for me to criticize a movie for having a monarchy? Or even that it portrays a monarchy in a positive light? Not really. That's a personal value, one subjective to myself, and no matter how commonplace it might be in the cultural climate I was raised in, it doesn't make it a universal law by any means. External morality is subjective to the real world, decided by different cultures and people through time. This is true regardless of who you are, even if you resort to religious examples like people have always tried to and failed to in my previous examples, since no one religion can objectively prove their deities or teachings are intrinsically more real than anyone else's. Bitch about it in the comments if you want, I could use the engagement. So now we're left with a funny idea that seems to throw a wrench into everything I said, the concept of allegory. Basically try and convey ideas through art, usually political or moral. And obviously, this is something that has existed forever, be it shining a light on the victims of colonialism through War of the Worlds or explorations of wealth inequality in The Time Machine, but it's gained more traction these days with the weird-ass culture war that the internet is so pathetically obsessed with. Since art has been used to explore ideas and give commentary on society before, it stands to reason that it's still used for that today. And I think a piece of art can be used to explore really any theme it wants, even if that idea is something I disagree with. But this is where I finally make my main point. If an artist is trying to convey an idea, they shouldn't accidentally contradict that idea. The theme of any piece of art is like the thesis on a paper. It's the core argument. If you can't support your argument with evidence or reason, you've objectively failed at conveying that idea. I think one of the funniest examples in recent media is when there was this terrible show about two Marvel superheroes I really liked, bickering with everyone over a shield that they claimed had an intricate history when it's actually a shield from an alternate timeline entirely. John Walker, a decorated soldier and a generally good guy, was given Captain America's shield from another timeline and was given the title of Captain America as well, and at one point he executes a terrorist who was also a superhuman. What he did was technically a war crime according to the real world, but in-universe characters commit actions like that a lot. But in those cases, the writers and filmmakers portray it in a positive light. They're trying to go for an allegory of American interventionism, turning a blind eye to war crimes. But it completely falls flat when they create the context of a superhuman being executed for terrorism. Sure, he doesn't have a weapon on him, but his own hands are weapons. Watch any MCU movie with super soldiers and you'll realize how dangerous they are. Even without an active threat of being shot or blown up, a normal human is in extreme danger when they're near a rogue super soldier. The show tried to strawman John Walker as some horrible psycho when he did that, especially under the emotional circumstances of watching his best friend get murdered, and unfortunately, the writers strawmanned him. Plain and simple. The writers wanted an outcome that made him look bad, even though nothing about him was bad. And before anyone asks, no, I haven't seen Thunderbolts, and no, I don't care to. Another hilarious example that my audience is oh so familiar with is Disney's cinematic disaster piece Zootopia, a movie that pretends to have a message about the dangers of bigotry and how racial divides are arbitrary and they hurt people. In theory, it's a great concept, but they chose the worst possible angle to explore it. They make prey animals the ethnic minority, presenting them as unjustifiably fearful of predator animals. The idea is that they're basically stand-ins for white people in America. The comments on my previous Zootopia video really tried and failed to explain how it's not an allegory for racism, but they straight up use language throughout this entire film, specifically written to be framed through a racial lens. And, as I explained earlier, you can't moralize a movie and be objective about its quality. It's a moralistic fallacy, since morals are subject to change over time and depending on where you are in the world. What you can do, however, is criticize a movie for compromising on its own themes. Zootopia, among countless ill-informed creative decisions, attempted to equate real-world racism, something that is entirely a product of politicians through history taking advantage of ignorance, to a fictional world of animals, where they have objective biological differences. Regardless of prey and predator animals being equally mentally developed in this world, they still have differences. And with the plot of the film having a drug that causes animals to go savage, there is objectively a greater threat to prey animals given the typically smaller size and weaker capabilities. Objectively speaking, a tiger presents more of a threat to a rabbit than the other way around. So, in-universe, they justified interspecies racism, which is obviously something the writers didn't want to do. So, objectively speaking, they created a bad story for not properly exploring the ideas they presented. If Pirates of the Caribbean justified totalitarianism, or Indiana Jones justified Nazism, we'd have a massive problem. It's no different here. Zootopia isn't bad because it's racist. It's just a bad byproduct of the real issue. Zootopia is bad because it compromised on its own themes. This standard isn't that difficult, and neither are the standards that I've ever discussed before in my videos. If you present an idea, the expectation is that you make it make sense. I'm not asking for much else. Anyways, that's it for today's video. This is a quick one since the idea randomly popped into my head at the gym the other day. If you liked it, do all the shit YouTubers beg their viewers to do and join my channel membership so I can get money. Join my Discord server if you like shitposting. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a great day.